and welcome to Coffee with Phil, where our goal is to help you live a life of purpose on purpose. We believe that we each become wiser through the people we meet and the stories we hear. So today, we want to connect you with someone new. To help you find the wisdom in today's story, here's your podcast host, Phil Strong.
Well, hi there, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Phil. I'm glad you joined me online for coffee. This morning, I jumped on my truck and I headed north out of Te Awamutu into Hamilton to catch up with my guest for today that I'll introduce to you very shortly. On the way, I managed to enjoy myself a latte made here at home with my home roasted beans. And look, I just want to do a little plug here and say that I enjoyed my coffee in a compostable cup. So if you're a coffee snob and you consume coffee on the road like I do, it would be good to either have a takeaway cup that you can compost, that's good for the environment, or use a keep cup. I don't tend to take keep cups with me just because then they rattle around the car and there ends up being possibly a collection of them while I'm on the road. So that's not good to have that. So anyway, just an environmentally friendly message there for all of you that listen. Today I'm interviewing a very good friend. Her name is Lana. And as you'll hear in the interview, Lana and her husband Nathan have been very good friends of Kathy and mine for, we worked out, about 16 years. Our kids were quite young when we met. And the good thing about this is we have a very good friendship, which makes it easy for me to talk with Lana about a subject that is not so easy to discuss and may not even be easy to listen to. We've travelled through so many seasons together as friends. We have fought for each other. We have carried each other when necessary. We've encouraged each other. We've had fun together. And we have a little ritual that we have in place and have had for many years now, where we go out for birthday dinners. And we celebrate the person whose birthday it is by going to a restaurant of their choosing and just having a great night together, enjoying good food. But we've invested in our friendship, and that's what's really coming to the fore in this season of our lives. We can lean on each other in a lot more of a heavy load or a tough season when necessary because of the investment we've made into our friendship. And so what I'd like to do is encourage you to make sure that you have friendships like that, like this one, and that through the times, good and bad, you'll be able to make sure that you can lean on each other. Well, look, things that you can gain out of today's interview, these things that I think you'll find intriguing, is just the openness and I suppose how raw the conversation gets. From time to time, you might hear one or both of us just holding back some tears or wiping them away. Because Lana's really honest and she wants to open herself up for your benefit, that if you're struggling with living with depression, or you have a friend, a loved one, or a spouse that is struggling with depression, then our aim here today is that you'll find the gold in this interview to help you walk this journey. She talks about the early stages and how she felt and what was going on. She talks about the stages she's gone through, and there's a wonderful analogy around being in ICU, but then moving out of ICU into a rehabilitation season and then reintegration. So I'm sure you'll enjoy that as she shares it. But more importantly, what I love about Lana's story is how she brings God into it, and there's something for every single person in this, because one thing that we do not want in your world is you living in a reality that is not the best reality for you. So look, grab yourself a coffee, a cup of tea if you need to, sit back, put your pods in your ears or turn the volume up and listen to this interview that I know you'll enjoy. Well, hi everyone, here we are today with Lana, my guest for today on the podcast, Coffee with Phil, and we've just enjoyed a decaf coffee. She's made me that coffee when I got here, so thanks, Lana.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, the flavour was good. The heart rate hasn't changed, so
Yep. That would be right.
So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's okay.
Today we're going to talk about living life with depression, and as I said in the introduction, Lana has been a good friend of Kathy and I for a long time.
Yeah.
What would that be?
Probably about 16 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
I remember Grace was a toddler, preschooler when we met you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, we've been friends for 16 years and spent a lot of time together, usually around a good meal.
Yep.
And something we both enjoy. But as a good friend of the family, Kathy and I have just journeyed with you. And that's really what I want to centre on today and hope that your story helps other people.
Yeah.
So we've called this Living with Depression or Living Through Depression. So Lana, when did you first begin to notice a personal experience of depression?
So about 5 years ago, I was quite involved with church. I have 4 children, which was always busy, but I was okay with it. And I was on the sozo team at church. And probably my first clue was I was running a sozo, and I would be the lead person most often in the sozo. And I felt myself towards the end of the sozo, generally you'd try and lead that person into having a connection with Father God so that you're leaving the sozo in a really good place.
So let's pause. Sozo, for if you don't know, is an inner healing ministry. It's a prayer session and it's facilitated. So Lana is helping a person to walk through some inner healing, emotional, spiritual healing, by helping them connect with God.
Yes,
that's what
right.
you're doing.
Yes. So the end of the sozo, and I knew that was the next logical step as we were wrapping up the sozo, and everything in me didn't want to do it. And I thought, oh, that's not good. So I did it anyway, because of course I don't want to leave this person with a bad sozo experience, but it really made me stop and sit up and take notice. And I thought, that's not right. So I ended up praying about it, and I just felt like it was time for me to come off the sozo team, in which I did with blessing. And there was a series of things that happened that I just felt like I wasn't coping with life how I had been. And it was compounding. And I was probably on the verge of a breakdown. And so through wisdom, I started pulling back from the things that I was involved with. I was also running a women's prophetic group at church, which I pulled back from and handed over to other women to lead. I can't think right now of anything else at the time, but it was just like I felt like I was falling apart. And there was a journey that I went on that I had no idea that I had depression. After I had my second child, I had postnatal depression. And so every time I'd have this thought, maybe I have depression, I would think, no, because I've had postnatal depression, so I know what depression feels like, and that's not this. That's what I kept on telling myself. Through a series of events, I ended up at the doctor for a different reason. And I really think it was a real God thing, because I had a different doctor, a different GP from my normal one. And it was the last appointment of the day. And normally at the doctor you get your 10-minute slot and you push through. But because I was his last appointment, and he started asking me different questions that didn't even relate to the issue that I'd gone in for. And he basically diagnosed me. And I out loud, I said to him, I don't have depression because I've had depression before and I know what it feels like. And this voice in my head said, but what if this is a different sort? And that was it. I just realized, oh my gosh. And it was really hard for me, because I think the generation that I'm from is a generation within the church that people don't really acknowledge mental illness as something that is out of your control. And it's traditionally been something that you feel shamed for. You're not a good enough Christian, you just need to pray harder, blah, blah, blah. And of course, there's all those verses in the Bible about taking every thought captive. And it's just funny how, like, the very verse that's supposed to help you is the very verse that Satan uses against you to make you feel like a crap Christian. And it was incredibly hard for me. But luckily for me, I had a lovely woman, Jenny, who I was doing life with. And she was like a mentor to me. And also she was actually a mental health nurse. And so I went to her and she said, if you could take this pill and it would make you feel better, is it worth it? And that was my answer. So that was when I went on antidepressants. But it was also the time that I actually realised I had depression since I was 15 years old, and I'd been living with depression my whole life. And by this stage, I was probably 35. So I'd been living with depression that whole time, but I had no idea. I just thought life was that hard for everybody. And I look back on my life and I can see a real difference of the person that I was pre-depression, which was pre-puberty as well. So I went through puberty, and you girls go through mood swings and so forth, and so you just think that's part of what my problem is. And God revealed this to me, and it's not until I talked to my sisters, we had the same upbringing, and so I'd talk about what would go on inside of me, and it was through talking to them that I realised what I was like was not normal. It was not supposed to be normal. Life's not actually supposed to be that hard, and it's not actually that hard for everybody.
Wow. So the concept of just not feeling like you're coping, those were the symptoms that you felt? Like, just was that overwhelm? Was it unable to make decisions? Just trying to help people, recognize what may have been those external signs that you would notice the second time.
Yeah.
Postnatal, obvious.
Yeah.
Second time, a different kind of depression.
Yeah, I think it was just the level of just not being able to cope. No, it was almost like I didn't know who I was, and it kind of felt like I'd been totally unpacked, and like if I was made of blocks and all the blocks were thrown up in the air, and it was almost like I was going through a second puberty where it's just like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know how to react. I don't know what opinions to have. I was incredibly tired all the time, and just had a very poor ability to cope with normal day-to-day life. And I wasn't working at that stage. I had four children, but what I was involved with church, I was pulling back from everything. I couldn't cope with the things that I was involved. I literally pulled out of everything, and struggled to just raise the kids. I remember one particular day, it was like that sense of darkness that was chasing me down. And I remember one particular time, I was on kids' church on a Sunday, and Nathan, my husband, had gone to somewhere maybe Taupo for a running event, and he was away all day, and the sense of like, I can't cope on my own, I need him home. And the thought of doing kids' church the next day was just like, I just can't do it. I don't even know if I can explain any more detail than that, but it was just like I could feel the darkness like on my doorstep.
So like a overwhelm, like a blanket that come over you, kind of just like consuming you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say a blanket, because a blanket almost would signify a sense of comfort and peace.
Right.
So it certainly wouldn't be it'd be like a dark storm, really.
Right.
That it's just like you're trying to resist the sense of something overtaking you that is not welcome and not pleasant, but without having the control to be able to stop it.
Yeah, right. And yet life is going on around you. You've got your 4 daughters. Nathan's away. You've got expectations of others. You've got to try and live in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was kind of hard pulling back from things too, because, it takes vulnerability to, because it's easy to fob somebody off, and so you've got your commitments at church, for example, and I'm trying to pull out of like, I can't do kids' church. I had to get Nathan to do it for me because I couldn't. You feel like you're letting people down as well.
So other people would observe you withdrawing?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah? So you got Nathan to cover for you.
Yeah.
That's what partners do. But the people around you may have felt like you were withdrawing yourself from them, from what was your normal.
Yeah.
And I'm highlighting that really so that those of us that are not traveling the journey of depression can at least recognize what may be going on in someone's world, someone that's close to us.
Yeah. Well, I did lose a lot of friends during that period. which I think just highlights the difference between the people in your life that are actual friends versus, I guess, more acquaintances masquerading as friends. And I think there's a level that you need to take responsibility to be honest with people, but you can't actually always trust that information with everybody in your life. And I don't think it's wise to either. But I certainly, it was what it felt like at the time was that I was getting rejected out of like mums groups or coffee groups that I was involved with. I know I got talked about, and nobody sort of supported me. Nobody ever came to me to ask, what's going on with you. And even to this day, I don't know if most of them would even know what I was going through. So I just had to leave it be, I guess. And then you have the friends around you that do know, that aren't scared to ask about it. I think that was a real key thing, is that you'd notice the people that you could see them stepping around it, being a bit awkward. And I know it's hard to try and talk to somebody when you don't have your own experiences. It's almost like if you're not in the club. I remember years ago I had a miscarriage, and it was like the people that had gone through that yourself would so come and talk to you about it. The people that haven't experienced it were really awkward and never mention it. But you want to talk about it because it's actually a part of your life. And I actually really welcomed the people that would ask, how am I going? Specifically asking how I am going with depression. And I have actually thanked those people and said, like, I really appreciate you, like, not being scared of it. It's almost like you feel like people are scared of you or scared of that, and so they avoid that, and as a result of avoiding that, they're avoiding you.
Right. So we've got a noticeable change in your circle of friends. You called those that were more acquaintances drifted away. Those who were true friends gathered closer. I remember the four of us, the two couples, we went to hear Danny Silk teach on relationships once. And remember he talked about the circles of friends. Man, I've used that so many times. So for the listeners, we're talking about concentric circles that are around us at the centre. And you have like a tight circle. Let's just label it A. And then you've got a bigger circle outside that, which is B, and then wider as C. But I think what we learned from that experience was that you really need to be clear on who is in that tight circle. Who's earned the trust to be there, who's got the investment in the relationship to be there. And in a situation like this, Lance, if we use that analogy or that model, it's really okay to tighten the circle and not be too worried about those that are on the peripheral edges, acquaintances or known about, because they're not going to really help, are they?
Oh, absolutely. And I actually thank God for the timing of that message, because it was kind of a random night, wasn't it? We found out Danny Silk was in Hamilton and we went, and it was just opened my eyes up to the exact thing I needed at the time, that I was really struggling in relationships, and realizing, okay, those people are actually, let's call them in the D category, which means that, they're more acquaintances. So I can't actually rely on them to be helping me with my needs, because they're not actually in a circle. And it was easy to release them from any, burden or feeling of like you're not meeting my expectations or my needs or whatever, because they're not actually the people that should be doing that. And that's okay.
I think one of the other things I learned from that was also it's important for personal safety.
Yeah.
Like if I expose myself in a way that's vulnerable to too many people, I risk being damaged.
Yeah.
If I'm too open with someone that doesn't love me or doesn't relate to me or isn't prepared to invest, then that vulnerability could actually cause me some harm.
Yeah, definitely.
So when you're experiencing depression, you're feeling overwhelmed, you can't cope, or you just feel like, as you said, all the blocks have been thrown up in the air, you want to be protecting yourself in that season. And so we need to help people realize that some extent withdrawal is okay, tightening the circle is okay, because it's about safety whilst you navigate the discovery of who you actually are now and how to live as you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so people could observe that. You've talked about your experience in it. What was the one thing that you needed from your close friends in that time? You've talked about acknowledging the journey you're on, being open to talking about depression and asking you how you were. Is there anything else?
I think it was really important to have my friends praying for me, because in that place, I was so shut down. It's almost like I couldn't really think that clearly, and I didn't know what I needed, and I didn't even know how to pray. Like, I remember there'd be times like I'd be sitting outside at night and I'd be looking up at the sky and just saying, God, help me, because that's all. There was nothing else that I could think of to pray apart from help. And so it was really good, like, knowing that I had friends praying for me in an actual meaningful way that was going to help me, because I couldn't do it for myself.
Yeah, I think that's a great reflection, because those, if we're talking about the inner circle of friends, those people in that circle almost identify themselves by taking on a willing responsibility to stand in place of prayer, support, and fighting for you.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that really helped was the understanding of the journey, that it was okay to do nothing. And I think in today's society, it's, especially for mothers as well, it's like we're at home raising our children. The second the children are at school, it's the expectation of like, oh, what are you doing? Are you working? What's your plan now? That now that your kids are at school, like, well, of course you're going to go back to work. And so regardless of whether I was going through a mental health journey or not, like, I was a stay-at-home mother. So that was always an interesting conversation with people anyway without that. And so it was really helpful having people around you that they weren't challenging me to get back of like, when are you serving at church again? When are you doing this? There was none of that. And I even had one friend that used to joke about like, oh, enjoy laying on the couch for now, because that stage is not going to last forever, and there'll probably come a time that you'll wish you were on the couch. And it's it was a joke at the time, and we would laugh about it. But now I can see, because I'm not on the couch anymore, and sometimes you think, oh man, it'd be nice when all you want to do is just lay around and watch Netflix. It's like, that's fine for a period, but
yeah, so
not
what
as
you're
a healthy
saying
lifestyle.
Is, and perhaps even on reflection, some advice that you would give to others is to accept for a time it's okay to do nothing. It's okay to let go of your expectations of yourself, or even rejecting others' expectations of yourself.
Yeah, but there's also a balance as well, because there is a certain level that, like, laying in bed, being on the couch, like doing nothing, that's what you need. You need that recovery time. And I guess it's like, if you were to think of a patient in hospital, like if somebody's in ICU, they're not in ICU forever. They're there until they get to that point that they can move on to a ward. And when they're on the ward, the nurses, they're trying to get them up out of bed, they're trying to move their limbs, and they're trying to rehab them to get better. So I guess I'd liken it to like the couch period being like ICU. That's fine for a period. And I guess it is hard to know where that balance is, because I tend to push myself anyway, so I probably wasn't in any danger of this really, but I felt that shift where it's just like, I want to stay on the couch because it's easy and it's safe and it's lazy, but it's not good for me anymore. And I noticed that shift in myself of like, this is not good for me. And that was that point. It's like you're shifting onto the ward where you're starting to be involved a bit more and starting to, not back to the same stage I used to be, but you're slowly starting to be reintroduced to society, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's a really good analogy for some that might help. That idea of the ICU being, you are literally isolated, you're under more intensive care.
Yeah.
You're definitely in that recovery mode and rest mode.
Yeah.
And I think we're speaking to those people that are really feeling the chaos, the overwhelm, and the extremity of depression, that rest and recovery is an essential season for you.
Yeah. Definitely.
but not a permanent season.
No, not a permanent
Yeah,
season.
and so you had Jenny coaching you through that?
Yes, yeah. And what was really good about her too is because I would always be looking at what I'm not achieving, what I'm not doing, what I want to be doing. And she would always get me to look back and go, but look what you've done. And it was so good for me because I would beat myself up that I wasn't doing well enough or whatever. And even now, without having Jenny, I do remind myself, okay, I wish to have been doing this, but look at how far I've come. And so it's really good to actually reflect and celebrate that you've had some wins and you've had some progress, even though you're not perfect.
Yeah, a couple of keys there. One is celebrating what is going well. But talk about the importance of having an external guide. So Jenny was a mental health nurse. That made it real easy for you, beneficial. But what about like counselling, or like how important is it that someone has that person as a external yardstick to help them along the journey?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I do also think that there's seasons that people are in your life for that season, and then there might be a different person. I did go through a period of counselling. I can't think of how long ago it was, but it wasn't actually directly related to the depression. I have a feeling it might have been before it actually, but so yeah, Jenny was my person that she would check on me regularly, and I think what's good about that is it is a bit more of a formal setting than from friends, because even friends have that limit of if that level of pushing or encouraging of, they don't want to damage your friendship by pushing too far. So I think it is really important to have a mentor or a counsellor. And I also did go through a couple of SOZOs as well. But I did also feel for me personally that God was pulling me away from that SOZO process, because I realised that I had learnt to rely on the process and not on God. And so he was trying to teach me that he's more important than the rules or the process of a SOZO, and that was hard.
Yeah, so that's about what we know as a personal relationship with God through all circumstances, which we'll talk about maybe near the end. One of the questions that I wanted to talk about today was, when something happens in a family, what happens to one affects everybody.
Yeah.
You've got 4 beautiful girls now growing up older and older. Makes me feel really old. But, let's just talk for a minute, if you can, about helping people accept that what happens in the life of one person in a family does have an effect on others.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if I think it was about 5 years ago, so my youngest at the time would have been 5 and my oldest about 11. And I think they were too young at the time, so I would keep it private and hidden. And whether or not that was the right thing to do, I don't know. But there did come a time that I felt like I actually need to share this with them, because if I'm withdrawing, I don't want them to feel rejected because of withdrawing. That it's actually about me, it's not about them. That if I'm kind of grumpy or snapping or not coping, that again, it's not their fault. And that's probably been one of the hardest things too about going through this journey, is that of the effect that it's had on them. That, has felt out of my control, but it's also my fault as well. It's kind of a funny one. And so it was actually interesting too, because my oldest daughter, Mia, she's quite a caring person and somebody that really comes alongside. And I really struggled with her because she would draw close to me and I would push her away. And I knew that I was doing it, but it was really hard for me to try and figure out, well, where's that balance? Because if I let her in, then she's going to see the ugly. And I didn't know if that was okay for her age, for her maturity, because you want to provide your kids with a stable family, with a stable mum and a stable dad. They have a good relationship, and that you're not making the kids feel unsafe or whatever because of it. And so it's like trying to find that balance of you're sharing and being open and honest with them so they know what's going on, but you're not sharing too much that it actually scares them and makes them feel unsafe or whatever. And so I ended up actually getting coaching from Loving on Purpose, have coaching online. So I went to that and I received coaching from Brittany. And she said she really encouraged me to share and open myself up to Mia. And she said, of course, you'd have a boundary of like if things are really bad, like for example, if you had suicidal thoughts or anything, you wouldn't share that. But she really encouraged me to open up. And it's actually really transformed our relationship because it's meant that I've stopped pushing her away and I've let her in. But it's also like at times that we've had disagreements or arguments. It's meant, and I haven't coped with it. And in the past, I'd like maybe raise my voice and I'd start yelling at her and getting into a place where I don't like that, but that's how I am. To actually saying with her, I actually can't cope with this. And so I've actually put up a boundary and you have shot past the boundary. And now you don't like that I'm like getting all agitated and yelling at you, but it's because I can't cope with this. And you've disrespected my boundary and the boundary is there because of that. And she's really taken that on board and understood it. And so when she's almost about to shoot past the boundary again, she's like actually apologized and pulled back behind the boundary, which I find really valuable because even though it's not her job to be the person that manages my self-control, it's my job, but at least she understands that there's a level that it's actually hard for me and she doesn't want to contribute to that side of things.
It's really powerful because you're actually helping her in her maturity. You're helping her actually harness and strengthen the gifts that she has, you know, because she is someone that draws alongside others. She's an encourager. She's got high levels of compassion, but she's learning how to meet the need of the person in front of her, not just go on what she needs or what she feels she can add.
Yeah.
And I suppose in reflecting and hearing you share that, I'm just excited about what that would look like for her in the future.
Yeah.
You know, as she navigates perhaps, you know, tertiary studies or she begins working and she has friends in her world, she's going to be much, much stronger because of what she's learned through the experience.
And I think not scared of it. So, you know, she'll be a friend that will actually be able to talk to others that even though she's never experienced it herself, she's not scared to go there.
Yeah.
And I think she could always pick up that things went right for me. She'd ask how I was, she'd ask me stuff, and that was the point that I'd be pushing her away, which I felt like it was sort of damaging our relationship. So I'm glad that we've found a new normal. And, you know, and she's older as well. She's 16 and a half. So, you know, so I can trust her with more.
Also, we don't need to go into all the details, but 4 girls, completely different.
Yes.
And obviously, you've said different ages. So it's about being age relevant.
Yes.
With their level of maturity, but also recognizing that they're different and unique in their makeup. So how you relate to Mia is different than how you relate to Amani, who's your second child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for parents to understand, which is why I wanted to talk about the whole how does it affect the family thing. Because, you know, each one of us that have children know that our children are different, they have different needs, but what I love about what you've said, Lance, is that you've said we now have a new normal relationship, and you have been quite intentional through your coaching about forming that through the experience.
Yeah. And with the area that I struggle with Amani is that I find she models my behaviour the most out of anyone. And so she's almost 15 and so where I might be impatient and snappy and maybe a bit intolerant, she very quickly models that, and I find that very hard because I don't behave that way because I want to. I sort of behave that way because I've sort of lost the control to actually rein it in, and then I see it modelled in her and the way she treats her sisters, and it's not pretty. So it really is like holding a mirror up And it gives me more motivation to get myself sorted, because it's that whole thing of do as I say, not as I do. It's like you can talk to them until you're blue in the face about, like, this is the right way to behave. This is, this is powerful behavior. This is, but when what's being modeled to her is actually completely opposite, you feel like a fraud. And there have actually been times that the girls have thrown back at me in the heat of the moment of like, well, you do it. And it's very humbling to have to say to them, yes, but is that attractive behaviour? Is that actually the behaviour? Is that the person you want to be? Because that's me that I'm talking about, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, so what you're saying is you're being open and vulnerable with the girls.
Not all the time, and not as much as I'd like, but I'm trying, yes.
Yeah, and I think that helps to live in harmony as much as is possible.
Yeah.
But recognising that there are bumps and bruises, and our behaviour affects each other.
Yeah.
And what I've also noticed is you've given your girls different, but you've given each of them different tools to use that you've learned along your journey that might help them either with their own travelling through life and puberty and change and relationship, but also to tools that help you work together as a family.
Yeah, I guess I sort of think of them a bit more like individually. Like, again, going back to Amani, I see in her what I was like, and she's very discerning, and I think that plays a big part in mental health, and particularly for people that don't have an understanding about discernment and atmospheres.
So let's just keep it to discernment.
Sure.
Can you define discernment for us so that we all know what you mean by that?
So discernment is a gift that you're able to pick up the mood of somebody, or if something's going on with somebody, you're actually picking up on it. But when you don't know that you have that gift of discernment, you're feeling all these things. You feel all these things around you, and you're up and down in your moods and your feelings, but it's actually because you're picking up on things around you. And so I was like that as a kid, incredibly moody, and you're just labelled as moody, and no discipline, nothing actually makes a difference. But back then, we have no teaching on discernment, no idea about the spiritual things. I was brought up in a Brethren church, so there was certainly no teaching around that sort of thing. And I was literally in my 30s when I was doing sozo training that it was introduced to me, and this light bulb went on in my head of like, oh my gosh, that is me. And that's explained an awful lot of my mental health, because it's in the ignorance of not knowing how to deal with it, you end up coming under it, and it's like there's a Bible verse about being tossed about in the waves. It's like you're literally tossed about in the waves of everything going on around you. So for me, trying to teach Amani discernment and how to understand it, how to manage it, how to deal with it, is really important, because the other girls don't seem to have that like she does, and so I don't want her to be a victim to it.
Yeah, so you're empowering her with what she has a sensitivity toward, but also in saying that, you're also empowering her to be able to interact with those around her that are having their own challenges, but consequently have an effect on her because of her sensitivity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good point to raise for others, though. Like if you have a child or you feel like you get tossed around by the waves, perhaps it's worth exploring whether or not they have an openness or a gift of some kind of sensitivity and discernment to other people's moods or emotions that could be affecting them.
Yeah.
Because often, we've talked about this a lot, but we've seen the impact it can have when I take on your grumpiness.
Yeah.
My life has changed, and it's actually not mine to own, but I picked up on it.
Yeah.
And that might actually help set some people free.
Yeah.
They go, actually, this grumpiness isn't me, so I'm not going to own it, but I also now know that I can relate to the person around me differently because I'm picking up on what's happening to them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. So let's shift gears then and say you're now 5 years on from when you first noticed it.
Yeah.
It's a journey that doesn't have a destination.
Well, destination's full health.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So I actually came off the antidepressants about a year ago, a little bit over a year ago.
So you were on antidepressants for about 4 years?
No, not that long.
Right.
Maybe 3, I think.
And let's just pause there.
Yes.
How did they help you?
Initially, they didn't, and it was horrible. But again, like there's these little things that happen along the way that I can see that God was working in my life. And so I'd gone to the doctor, like I was telling the story before. I'd gone to the doctor. He'd prescribed me antidepressants. The following day, I went to see Jenny, who prayed with me, and I really felt that it was the right thing to do. So I went and filled the prescription that day. And as I pulled into my driveway, a friend of mine who's not a Christian, but has been on antidepressants for many years, that I didn't know this about her, happened to see me pull in my driveway as I was driving past and diverted and came see me, said, should we go out for breakfast? So over breakfast, I shared with her, just went to the doctor, I've got antidepressants, and it scares me. And she shared about how her journey and what it was like. And it was the most helpful thing, because for about 2 weeks, I felt rubbish. I felt worse than I did before I took the antidepressants. Every single day she'd text me, how are you going? How are you feeling today? And it was a meaningful text, not just like, how's it going text, but a meaningful, how are you? And I could be 100% honest because I knew she understood. And it was so helpful because like I felt sick all the time. I lost my appetite. I lost so much weight that it was unattractive. And I just felt worse. But she, because she knew the journey, she says, don't worry, that only lasts a couple of weeks and then you'll be okay. So it was her telling me that got me through. Otherwise, I wouldn't have continued. I felt so rubbish. And I was also aware that there's a lot of different medications, and that quite often medications can make you feel worse, and you end up having to chop and change between medications before you find the right one and the right dosage. So it was always like this point with me of, that 2 weeks was horrendous that I was adjusting to these antidepressants. But there was at the point that I prayed about it, and I felt God say, I got you on the right medication and the right dose straight away, so you didn't have to worry about this. And the weight came off. It was a massive relief to feel like, okay, I'm good. I don't have to worry about that area of my life. I can just take my pill every day and trust that it's doing the right thing. But there came a point that antidepressants do have their side effects. So I'd gone from like losing so much weight to like putting so much on. Like I need another thing to be depressed about. But there came a point that I knew that like I wanted to come off, but I also knew it was a journey. So I was seeing a biochemist who was helping me with my physical health. And she was really good, saying, don't come off your antidepressants until you have these things sorted in your health. So that was really good. And I also went back to Jenny when I felt like I wanted to come off. And I said, she'd prayed with me about going on. I'd gotten a very clear picture from God that he was, that I'd been running up and down a dark tunnel trying to find a way out. And these antidepressants was like Jesus was opening the door to this tunnel and opening me up to be able to step out of the tunnel into this light, bright world. So that was what the antidepressants were doing. So I wanted a promise from God that coming off them was going to be the right thing, because I knew from other people's stories how bad you can end up being. So she prayed with me, and I very clearly felt Jesus say that I could have actually come off a while ago, but it was all up to me and me feeling comfortable with my timing. So it was easy for me to come off and go, so when because I still have bad patches, and it's easy to start thinking, oh no, it's back, maybe I shouldn't have come off, and to get myself worked up about it. And so it's like, no, I have a promise. And also somewhere in the middle of this journey, I was at church, and I had during a time of worship, God had given me a picture of the depression was like this big, massive cube, and I was like a tiny little ant next to this big cube, and I'd been chained to it, and the cube represented the depression. and he showed me that I was no longer chained to it and I had permission to walk away. And I knew from this picture that the journey of walking away, it was a journey. It wasn't like a suddenly I'm set free and it's all but in my past. But as with anything, the further you walk from it, the smaller it is in the distance until it disappears over the horizon line and it's literally not visible anymore. So it was a picture that I held very strong during that time and I would never talk about my depression. It was always that depression. I didn't want to own it. It wasn't me. It wasn't part of me, and it wasn't permanent. And I refused to allow it to be permanent in my life. It was hard, but and then having a mindset too. There was a particular time that I felt like God say that I was set free. So I still had to walk out that journey, but I was set free. So every time I'd be at a church event that there'd be some sort of altar call for depression, I'd be tempted to go up. But I'd say, no, I'm set free. I don't actually have to go seeking healing and freedom from something I'm already set free from. And I think that's an important part of the journey, is to have faith in what's yet unseen.
Wow, that's really good. So just reflecting on that, there's this picture of you that you were chained to this massive cube, but as you were set free from that, you had to walk away from it in order to minimize its impact on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about the promises God's given you, the hope that you have, and how you hold on to them. The honest truth, though, is for someone that's jumbled up in chaos, is it hard for them to hear from God?
Yeah, it is. But I found like I would have times of clarity, that it's just like I would have this one picture or this one word. And I think that's where it's important to have somebody that can help lead you to that place. I wasn't able to do it on my own. I did it with Jenny. Although the picture of the cube I did get in a moment of worship at church.
Yeah, that was also 3 or 4 years later, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a promise, though. So it was a promise to know that it wasn't forever, which was important. But it's important to position yourself in a place to hear. So if at home your quiet times aren't successful, or you're in that place of being on the couch where, like I was saying earlier, all I could pray was help me. That's all I could pray. So you're not really positioned into a place, because you're kind of like you're in a coma if you're in ICU stage. So I would purposely go and seek out. I had a book club that consisted of 3 friends, one of them being your wife, Kathy, who I would rely on to give me words when I wasn't hearing. And they were the words that would keep me going on a day-to-day sense. But the big words would be, I would seek out Jenny, who, and she would lead me in that sozo style. So I'm the one getting the picture. And sometimes like the picture would be really disturbing. Like, for example, I had this one time that I felt like I was in a stormy sea on a tiny rowboat. And I felt that was a true representation of my life at the time. And she was actually able to lead me through of like, but is that the truth? And so Jesus was able to completely exchange that picture from being out in the open waters on a crazy stormy sea in a tiny rowboat, completely unprotected, to in a safe harbour, tied to a jetty, and the sun was out. So what feels like your reality in the time is not Jesus' reality all the time. So it's important to position yourself, going to church, going to those worship nights and things, because even though you don't feel like it, you've got to position yourself, because honestly, the hope I got from God was what got me through. If I didn't have that, honestly, I don't know how. I'd probably still be on the couch, to be honest.
Yeah, so if you're someone that does have a faith in God, then Lana's given you some real keys for that. But if you're someone that doesn't have a faith in God, then perhaps the starting point for you is to have that simple cry for help that Lana shared earlier. And my faith and my belief is that God will always respond when someone cries for help.
Yep.
Also, what's been helpful is Lana's talked about having friends that will encourage, like your book club, and I remember the girls that were part of that. It was an amazing time. But also having someone specific that could help you personally connect with God and help you to receive his perspective on your world, which is often different than your perspective.
Yeah.
And when you exchange your perspective, in your case, that story was the lumpy sea and the lost by yourself and, no hope. And you were able to exchange that for actually what God was seeing, as Jesus told you, was that actually, no, I'm bringing you to a safe place. It's calm. You're in a harbour and you're anchored, tied to a jetty, which also says, you're at a place of safety.
Yeah, because I think when you're walking through depression, it feels alone, it feels scary. You have good days and bad days, and it's easy for the bad days to take over and send you into this place of feeling, I'm alone, I'm never going to get out of this, it's horrendous, this is my life. And to actually know that, actually the truth is that God is walking me through this, and that I am going to come out the other side, and that I'm not alone. That's the biggest thing, is that I'm not actually alone. Sometimes it feels like you are, but you're actually not.
Yeah, that's great encouragement, and it's said with determination from someone that's walked, 5 years through it, believes that, Lana said she believes she's set free and she's now walking into that full health. So if you're struggling with depression, we would say most certainly don't do it alone.
Absolutely
have
not.
hope that this too will pass, and that there are keys that we'll highlight after this interview for you to take away. But it would also be really important to stress that if you're struggling with suicidal thoughts or very, very harmful behavior thoughts, that you must seek help. And I'll make sure that at the end that there's some website links and some phone numbers you can ring. I know our family have had an encounter with suicide, and we needed to reach out, to help the person in our world with the experts that were available for that. So just want to flag that there is hope and there is help.
And I think another important thing that I really want to bring up too, that's made a massive difference for me personally, and I acknowledge it's not necessarily going to work for everybody, is that my diet has an extraordinary effect on my mental well-being. And this year I really feel that God's been highlighting that to me in a very obvious way. And I've always known it, but like Phil said earlier, we had enjoyed a nice decaf coffee. And so caffeine is something that will just send my mind out of control. And I've known for a while that caffeine can affect you in that way, but it wasn't until I experienced it myself. I came off coffee. It was very hard to make the decision in the first place, let alone doing it. And then I had a couple of coffees, and it was amazing just one coffee, how I would feel very agitated, very like doomsday, like everything's bad, picking a fight with my husband just after one coffee. So, and I've noticed lately, I've been really trying to clean up my diet in a way that it's about how I feel. It's not about losing weight and all of that stuff. It's about how I feel and how it makes me feel. So the main things for me would be sugar, alcohol, and caffeine, and preservatives. And I actually, through my journey of mental health, I was following somebody on Facebook called the Nourished Psychologist. She's an Australian woman. She would talk about certain ingredients of how it would have the effect on people. And I see all these young people having like cans of Red Bull or V or Monster or whatever those drinks. And there's so many young people with anxiety issues and depression issues. And it's so hard watching that and going, I can see that a lot of that food intake will really be affecting them, their mental health. And in the last couple of weeks have been noticing if I'm still eating like that, because I'm a real sweet tooth, if I'm still eating like that, I can feel like I've had a bad day and I feel like there's no hope, this is it, I can't control myself, I'm irritated with the kids, I can't get myself out of it, this is the way it is. And that feeling of hopelessness and negativity is so encompassing, and I have to like give myself a pep talk to say, no, it's only because of what I've eaten. And this last week and a half, I've been really good with eating well, eating whole foods and eating well. And it's amazing how my energy's good, my motivation's good, my interaction with the kids are good. And there's such a difference between the person you want to be and the person you are. And at the moment, that's the same thing. But when I'm not doing well with my diet, there's a big gap between the person I am and the person I want to be.
Yeah, so really good observation is how critical it is to what we put into our body as fuel determines what we get out of our body.
Yeah.
And you know, look, let's draw a comparison with that. People with allergies,
Yeah.
you know, they do food testing. They look at the results of, okay, I've had this in my body. What does it do to my skin? You know, those kind of prick test, scratch test things. That's an exact comparison to what you're saying with, you know, people may have a sensitivity or incapability to cope with the effects of caffeine or alcohol. I've got another friend I'm hoping to interview. He cannot handle the effects of alcohol because of his mental state, his emotional health. And so he's just had to learn that the hard way. You know, food, you know, we've got massive changes in people's diets now because they're realizing the fuel they put in affects the way that their body performs and functions. Yeah. So perhaps, you know, that's another takeaway for people.
Yeah.
They can just go on a little bit of a journey like you have, discovering what's good and what's not good for them, understanding that we're all unique.
And I think what's hard about that too is when you're going through a journey of mental health, it's really hard to feel responsible for your diet because you don't really have energy. And so it's actually really hard to, especially I find being a mum who's responsible for the household, you're trying to feed the entire family. And it just feels like another thing to do. And my mum gave me really good advice during that time. She said, you don't have to be perfect, just do one thing. And so, and I still have to remind myself that to this day because I'm a little bit of an all or nothing person. And I try and, change your breakfast. Just start with breakfast and then you wait until that's your normal. And then you might change one more thing, but only do something that you can cope with because otherwise you can't cope. You throw it all out the window and nothing's ever going to change. So be kind to yourself and trying to change things.
Real good. All right. Well, as we land this, you know, you've shared so many things. Is there anything else that you've learned, or let's change it different? The question: what advice would you give to yourself now that you know what you've journeyed?
Oh, that's a hard question, actually. I just think be kind to yourself.
That's great advice.
I don't think that there's anything that I could change because you're trying your best in the moment. And I think another thing that I was wanting to share too is that for the person being on the receiving end of somebody with depression, what I found really hard is that it's all going on inside. So even though what comes out of you might be a bit unpleasant, a bit mean, a bit...
we just got joined by Jessie the dog. She just came into the room to help us.
Yes, she likes being near me, don't you, Jessie? What leaks out is only maybe 10% of what's going on inside. And so you might be a bit unpleasant to those around you, a bit mean or a bit short or a bit irritated or whatever. But I was way more miserable than I was making everybody around me. And I think that's hard too because it's like you feel so guilty, but you're in turmoil inside, like absolute turmoil. And so I think being open and honest about that. And I had my 40th birthday this year in January, and that was one of my worst days with my mental health. And I was off the antidepressants by that stage. I'd felt like God had given me a promise about when I turned 40. And then the day itself was my worst day with moodiness and just internally feeling absolutely horrendous. And it's leaking out all over the show. And we were driving home with my husband and the kids, and I'd obviously said one nasty thing too many, and Nathan kind of snapped at me, and I felt so hideous. But I think it's so important to actually be honest about what's going on inside of you, because I think I spent so much time trying to hold it together, and when I probably just needed to let it out to Nathan so that he had an understanding and a compassion. But it's almost like when you're keeping it bottled up inside because you're trying to hold back how horrendous it is, and you're not wanting everyone to experience this horrendous thing. So yeah, I think that would be the advice that I would give myself a couple of years ago, is actually be vulnerable and open to those closest to you, like in your absolute inner circle, much sooner. And you can pour out your troubles to God, but pouring out your troubles to the absolute closest person is actually really important as well. And, getting them to pray for you. And I think it was harder sharing with Nathan than it was with my friends, because I know that I'm hurting him with my words, and then you've got to turn around and be really vulnerable and apologize.
Yeah. Look, there's so much more we could unpack there.
Yeah.
But so be open and be vulnerable to those that are closest to you, and be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Knowing that the process will take time,
Yeah.
but it's a process that you can travel through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Great. Well, thanks for sharing. You've been really open and honest, and our prayer is that people listening to this will be encouraged.
Yeah.
But will also find the necessary pathway for them to travel if them or their loved ones are journeying through depression.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, what can I say about that? That was raw. Lana was incredibly vulnerable in sharing her journey, and ultimately what I hope you get out of her being so open and perhaps sharing many aspects of her life, I really hope you find hope. If you're someone that's living through depression, then I really, really want you to latch on to the hope that she has. But also, one of my goals in doing this interview was to really help those who were living with someone else who may be living through depression. And ultimately, guys, what I really hope for you is that you've got some takeaways from a perspective that is not yours, but will help you to see what your loved ones might be struggling with. I've got a bunch of notes here that I wrote as I was editing that interview. And just a couple of highlights before we close off this podcast. Firstly, recognize what some symptoms are. There's some gold online. I'll put the links in the podcast for you to get to some websites that might help you, but look for the symptoms. Secondly, do not do this alone. Lana was really clear that she had a person she trusted called Jenny, and that person was pivotal to supporting her in the journey. Along with that, making sure that your family and loved ones can begin to understand what's happening. I think that's really important. Thirdly, one of the things that I took away that was amazing was just understanding how what goes in affects your emotional and your psychological state. So inputs like coffee or sugar, I think she said, alcohol. For me, I know lack of exercise is something that affects my mental health or my emotions and how I'm tracking during the week. So I actually have to make room for different forms of exercise to help me to maintain balance in what I'm doing. So input is vital, and maybe keeping a diary to track what you're putting in, and then corresponding to that, make a diary along the same page of what you're feeling or what you're experiencing. Could be a good piece of advice there. Finally, the last thing I'd observe that she said right at the end was just be kind to yourself. No one's perfect, but you have to accept that you're on a journey, and that journey will require you managing how you feel, but in all of these things, be kind to yourself. So I want to say thanks for joining me. I hope you had one or two coffees today. Coffee with Phil. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. make sure you get on my website, philstrong.com, and sign up to the broadcast, because as things progress in 2020 and beyond, I'll be releasing more broadcasts, not just audio. So make sure you catch them. And I look forward to having you on the podcast next time.